So welcome everybody. We are going to take the next 30 minutes or so and talk a little bit about self-care and specifically what that looks like for advocates and for DV advocates. A couple housekeeping things. You all see the chat bar, or the chat box I should say. If you want something to share with everyone that's in attendance, rather than clicking all panelists, you can click all panelists and attendees. So if you want to share a link or whatever, that button is there. I do also want to let you all know we are recording this webinar using the chat. So my name's Megan. I am currently our training specialist here at DVCAC. I've been working here for a little over 10 years in kind of a variety of positions and doing advocacy work. The other thing I want to let you all know is my coworker Molly is here. You won't see her or hear her, but she's here helping me out with the chat box if anybody has any issues or if anything comes up. So without further ado, let's get into it. So self-care. First and foremost, we, like I said, Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center. We work with folks who've experienced domestic violence or child abuse at any point in their lifetime. We really want folks to know that they deserve to feel healthy and safe in their relationships, and that means now. So I'm sure, like all of you, that we are kind of adjusting right now. We talk about self-care a lot as advocates, and then adding on this layer of, public health crisis, it makes things a little bit more stressful. And so we're going to start off kind of by what is stress. So really we're going to work through today, we're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk specifically about vicarious trauma. We're going to talk specifically about burnout. And then we are going to really talk about specific things that we all can do, right? And so right now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is kind of what we're all seeing, right? Our work is being amped up even more due to COVID-19 and due to Corona. We're having to change the way that we are providing services. We're having to change the way we work, right? So I'm working from home. I've had to kind of learn on the fly how to do virtual trainings, webinars, and really making sure that folks still know. And so first things first, right? Self-care. So I just want us to all pause, take the next half hour and take a minute to breathe, right? So go through a couple rounds of this GIF and take that time, right? So everybody breathe in, hold your breath, and let it go, right? We're gonna do that a couple more times, but it's that easy thing that sometimes just that small breath can help us pause and then keep going. And so burnout, right? Burnout really is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by excessive or prolonged stress. We've all been here, right? We've all been this image where it's just, I can't. Maybe I'm feeling like I can't do everything I want to do, whether it be at work, whether it be at home. And when I'm not able to do what I want to do, or feeling as though I'm supported in the way that I need to be supported in order to do this really difficult work. And then the other thing that we all kind of carry on as advocates, as folks who are in the caring profession, is we have that added layer of what's called vicarious trauma, or what's also sometimes referred to as compassion fatigue, right? So that's the impact on ourselves that occurs when we're hearing these stories over and over again, right? We're all in the caring profession for a reason. We want to be there for folks. We want to help folks. And so what that means is a lot of times we take on their stories, right? We take on that negative reaction to people's traumas, sometimes called the cost of caring, right? I think the other thing that we do is we sort of tend to brush this off like that's just part of the job, which yes, it absolutely is part of the job, but it's also really, really important for us to recognize when we are in that state of burnout or when we are in that state of compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma. I think it's also really, really important right now that we're recognizing that in addition to that burnout, in addition to that compassion fatigue, right now, we're all really going through this collective trauma, right? We're doing the best we can, but we don't know what it's going to look like, what our work's going to look like in a month, right? In Ohio, our stay-at-home order is now called a stay safe order, but it's now through the end of May. We're kind of, okay, some of us are maybe starting to go back to work, starting to go back in the office. Is that going to stay that way? Or is it going to continue and we're all going to have to quarantine again? We're all going to have to stay home again. We're in this state of uncertainty. And so that collective trauma, right, is both the immediate and that lasting effects of the emotional, behavioral, medical, societal effects of this traumatic, right? We're kind of probably all feeling that hopelessness, that panic. Maybe this looks like anxiety in the form of breathlessness or a chest tightness, right? Sleep disturbances. So I'll speak from my personal perspective. I don't tend to dream a lot, but I've noticed a lot over the past month that my dreams have become a lot more frequent and a lot more vivid, if you will. And that's something that I didn't realize until I was talking to a couple friends about. And one of my friends says, "Oh yeah, that's a pretty common trauma response." And that was a little validating for me that, oh, okay, this is explaining why I'm having so many dreams, right? Because it's occurring when we have that absence of safe space, right? Is there going to be another outbreak? How many of us not only are hearing the stories of our clients, of the folks that we're working with, but we're hearing these stories on the news about what we're all going through. And so looking at the risk factors, and I say this because a lot of times, whether it's our coworkers, whether it's ourselves, whether it's, volunteers, people get into domestic violence work because a lot of folks are survivors, right? A lot of us have experienced or may have experienced violent relationships, violent upbringings. And so we see that we've gotten through it, or someone a coworker's gotten through it, and we want to help others. And so it's really, really important that if it's us or if it's someone we care about, we recognize and acknowledge that past history of our trauma, our own personal lived experience. What are our life experiences now, or our life circumstances now, right? We also have to really, really recognize, and the reason I bold this is this is my own personal thing, is we really, really have to respect our boundaries. Knowing when to say no, and knowing that when we get into this work, sometimes all we can do is listen, and setting up that boundary is not only going to help myself, right? It's not only going to help me with my self-care, but it's also going to help model that behavior for our clients or the folks we're working with. When we continue to go above and beyond, when we continue to do just that next thing for this one client and the next client, we're going to burn ourselves out, right? That's when we're going to start to really feel that emotional burden even more than what's already expected. And so we're talking a little bit about symptoms of burnout, and then also the symptoms of vicarious trauma, right? There are going to be some overlaps, but it's also really important that we recognize some of those differences, because when we talk about ways to deal with that, or ways to take care of ourselves specifically, it's important to know what works for which, right? So burnout, I'm feeling just tired most of the time, right? I don't want to get out of bed. I do not want to go to work. I'm kind of over it. I'm done. Maybe I'm feeling sick more often. Maybe it's a headache, or it's a back pain, or it's a muscle ache. So I'll speak for myself. When I'm feeling stressed out, I carry my stress in my left shoulder. And so when I start to feel that left shoulder, kind of tense or kind of tighten up, become closer to my neck, that's my physical sign for myself that, oh, Megan, maybe it's time to take a day off. Maybe it's time to just lay on the couch and watch some trashy television, right? That's when I know. Have I started to eat more? Have I started to attend maybe more virtual happy hours now than I was in March or in April, right? Do I increasingly have that negative or cynical outlook? That burnout, when we're doing shelter work or when we're doing advocacy work, is every time a client comes to us, they only want, they're a needy client. They only want help because they need housing, or they're not really here for the right reason. And we start to push out that burnout on the folks that we're working, right? Our expectations for clients, for victims increases. And so we tend to, rather than internalizing, we push it out on those folks that we're working with. Or maybe it's extreme procrastination, right? I have this to-do list that I need to do, and rather than working through each of those things, I'm going to push it off, push it off, push it off, and not do some of those things that I need to do. And similarly with that vicarious trauma, with that compassion fatigue, is it going to look like I can't sleep? I can't concentrate, right? I just, things that I find enjoyment in, I don't find enjoyment in anymore, right? Those recurring memories. And so this comes from when we've all been there. We've had that work dream. And so some of that is a little bit normal, right? But maybe it's a recurring nightmare, or it's that constant thought about that client that left shelter, right? That constant client that left on not the best terms, or that you didn't think should go back home, but they went back home. um, and so rather than realizing that, you know, we can only help our clients so much, they need to make those decisions for themselves. I find myself continuously thinking about what could I have done, when we know it's not what we could done, but it's a choice that that victim or that client has made, right? That feeling of helplessness, mood irritability. Maybe, you know, it's been a long day at work and I came home and my partner says something that normally wouldn't mean anything to me, but I find myself snapping at them or coming across at them in a way that I didn't mean to. But that's because the work has started to affect me. Hypervigilant, right? There's a part of us that probably, when I, you know, am talking with friends or I'm talking with family about what I do, I realize sometimes that there are things that I do in my everyday life that I don't think about anymore, that folks that don't do this work don't necessarily think about. And so rather than just safety things, right, we become hyper vigilant. We start thinking that every person on our walk is a perpetrator. We start thinking that every person that we get in an argument with, or every person that is walking by my house, I'm locking my car door as soon as someone walks by. And we amp up what is safety precautions because of what we're experiencing, or what we're seeing at work, and what stories that we're hearing. It also can be isolation from others, right? So I'm an introvert. I am naturally kind of isolate, but I also know that there's a certain point that my isolation becomes unhealthy. And so if it's just like I've had a rough day, I'm going to turn on the TV, I'm going to read a book and not answer my text, that's fine. But if that one night turns into a couple nights, turns into a week, turns into I haven't talked to anybody in a week, 2 weeks, that's that compassion fatigue, that's that burnout. It might also look like compulsive behaviors, right? Overspending, overeating, poor self-care, right? I think a lot of times when we'll talk about this at the end, we tend to think about self-care as face masks and bubble baths and massages. But self-care is also showering, right? It's also waking up and changing our clothes or washing our hair. And so maybe rather than skipping a shower for the night, it's been a few nights, right? It's been a few days. Again, those reoccurrence of nightmares. Apathy, right? Just loss of interest in our job. We stop caring about our clients. We stop caring about the folks that we're working with. When we're answering that helpline, rather than, thank you, you know, how can I help you? It's, how can I help you? Right? And it's just another phone call. It's not this person's story. It's a story I've heard 100 times before, right? Also, mental and physical fatigue, or the use of substances to mask our feelings. We see this a lot with our clients, right? Folks that maybe come in and have been self-medicating, and so we think, oh, they have an alcohol problem. Well, that was their way of self-medicating. So we also really have to recognize that's not something that we might be doing as well. And so how do we manage those, right? How do we know what to do or what not to do? I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize that our mental health, oh, there's a typo, I need to change that. Sorry, everybody, there's always one. Our mental health informs and defines our physical health. Like I said, when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, I carry in my left shoulder. And then if my left shoulder, then my neck starts to tension. And maybe if my neck is tense, that turns into a headache. So we really, really need to be mindful. So I mentioned what I call toxic positivity, right? Good vibes only, everything's going to be okay. Okay, maybe, but also no. Sometimes I just want to be angry and mad and sad, and that's okay, right? I'm allowed to feel what I'm feeling. And so what's really, really important though is that with that, I'm allowed to feel what I feel, is that we're identifying our own problems some of this self-care is on us to take accountability and responsibility for. It also comes from a good work environment, a good friends, good family that support you, but we also have to sometimes take that accountability of what am I doing and identifying those problem areas, right? Taking a non-judgmental inventory of your life. Maybe this looks like a list. Okay, it looks like a list at work. It looks like a list out of work. What am I doing? And then taking a look at what's standing out right now. Oh my goodness, it's that, the helpline has increased, calls have increased, or maybe not the volume of calls on the helpline have increased, but the type of calls on the helpline have increased. And so what can I maybe take off my plate, or what can I talk with my coworkers about? I'm going to do this today. Can you do this today? And we'll flip-flop tomorrow. What are life situations? Folks with kids at home, right, are not only maybe working at home, but they're homeschooling. They're also their partners at home. And so maybe they had that break of like, I just need you to get out of my face for 8 hours, but now we're together all of the time. Recognizing those sources of stress, recognizing what's making us kind of want to pull our hair out is a really, really important first step in managing that stress. And so what can you do? Start a self-care plan. One thing that I'm going to send in an email to you all after this is a self-care plan that we do with all of our staff members once they start in our staff orientation. I personally think doing a self-care plan when we're in a healthy place is the best way to do it, right? When we're in a healthy mind frame, when we're okay, we can identify, oh, I enjoy this, I enjoy this. When we're in that place of burnout or vicarious trauma, it gets a little bit more difficult to identify and come up with that plan of action. And so looking at self-care strategies from the internet, what do your friends do? What do your coworkers do? And start making a list of activities and resources. So I've had to learn new self-care strategies. One of the things I always used to say is volleyball on Thursdays is my self-care strategy. I can't play volleyball right now. And so it's been me sort of exploring knitting or reading. And some days knitting works really well. And sometimes knitting just makes me even more stressed. And so knowing that it's not going to be a one project or a one craft or a one thing fits all every day. Seek professional support at work. We all know that this work is tough. And so having that ability to rely on your coworkers is really, really important. Having that person that you can call after a rough day or a rough case and just vent, right, to get that out is a healthy thing to do. And then checking in with your supervisor, or if you supervise folks, making sure that you're checking in with them. Hey, I really just need 5 minutes of your time to vent or to work through this process. And making sure finding time for yourself, right? So I started this work working in our shelter, and it's really, really easy as a shelter advocate to say, I work 8 hours a day. I don't have time for lunch. I don't have time to do this and this and this. Sure, some days we don't have time, but it's really, again, on us to say, hey, coworker, I'm going to go outside for 5 minutes, or I'm going to walk around the block. We feel guilty for doing that, I think, but we have to learn to find time in our day to stop and to breathe. Am I eating at my desk? Am I working through lunch? How am I spending my weekends? And so thinking of those simple ways, whether it's a walk around the block, it's I'm going to go hide in the bathroom for a couple minutes and play a game, a level on my phone on a game, whatever it is, to make sure that we're taking that time. Delegate, right? Again, this is hard for us to do sometimes, but it's saying, hey, coworker, I cannot do this today. Can you help me? Both at home and at work. And then I think it's also really, really important, and this looks different right now, right? I'm not driving the 15, 20 minutes into the office every day anymore. So what I've been finding is it's really important on those days that I wake up and do 5 minutes of stretching or yoga, my day is completely different. Some days it's easier than others to get out of bed and do that 5 minutes of yoga, but I notice it. And so if you're still going into work at shelter, am I making sure that I'm playing fun music on the radio? Am I calling my mom? Am I calling a friend? Am I staying connected to someone that way? Or am I just sitting in silence and just kind of brushing it off? I had a coworker who would physically, as soon as she stepped out of shelter, would brush her shoulders off as like, I'm wiping away today, and now I'm going to be home and present for the people in my life. And also learning to say yes or no. Again, we feel guilty for saying no, but am I the person that always ends up with committees at work? And I'm just saying, I can't do that. I cannot take on another project until I finish this other thing. Outside of work, are you volunteering on PTA? Are you also that person that your friends call for support, right? Again, we all do this work for a reason. And so it's okay to support our friends, but if they're constantly calling us because they know we're therapists, counsel, social workers, advocates, at what point are we saying, hey, I care about you. I really want to hear how your day is, but today I can't, right? Can we talk tomorrow? And so again, making sure that we're pausing, right? Taking breaths in, taking breaths out throughout our day. It's a really, really easy, simple thing to do. And so what do we do, right? What are some really concrete things we can do? And knowing that this list that we're about to go through is going to be different for different people. What works for you might not work for your coworker, might not work for your partner, whoever it is. And this is important because it's that, excuse me, that thing we all hear all the time. We can't take care of other people unless we're taking care of ourselves. If I'm burnt out on the helpline or I'm having a rough day, folks that are calling for help are going to know that I'm not giving them my full attention. And so while it might feel selfish or we might feel guilty to go around the block and do that quick walk, especially when the weather's nice and it's sunshiny, it's going to make such a difference in the rest of my shift for not only myself, but for my coworkers as well. And so kind of breaking self-care up into those 4 pieces. Self-compassion, allowing ourselves to feel our feelings. How many of us tell our clients every single day, you're not going crazy. You're allowed to feel really angry right now. You're allowed to feel annoyed, right? We are really good at telling other folks how to take care of ourselves. We really need to be mindful that like, oh wait, I just told so-and-so that they're allowed to be angry. Maybe I'm allowed to be angry too, right? I'm a huge proponent of like a good cry. I have my go-to movies. If I just have like all this pent up, cry and then move on, right? Get it out, let it kind of be that cleansing, and then getting and doing the work, right? Self-love, eating healthy, right? Yeah, I'm gonna have that piece of pizza and maybe, you know, I might have some French fries, but then like tomorrow I'm gonna need to eat an apple or tomorrow I'm gonna eat a salad, right? Finding that balance, making sure that I'm exercising. It is so important for me right now, even if it's 10 minutes and it's a little chilly, getting outside has been huge, right? And then finding what you like to do. Do you like to read? Do you like to dance? Do you like to write? Do you like to doodle or knit or whatever it is? Finding that thing that works for you. Expanding on ideas and community. Right now, it's really more important to lean on our communities, right? Texting that person. I had a friend from college I haven't talked to in a few months who texted me the other day and said, Megan, how are you? And it completely changed how my day went, right? So not expecting everyone to do that for us, but doing that for others, right? How many of us can go online and take a class after the days or watch a video? And so some really simple self-care strategies, right? Praising yourself. It seems silly and it's hard to do, but practice. Hey, you know what, Megan? You figured out how to do that webinar and you weren't that guy on the news that was caught without wearing pants, right? You did a good job today. Good job wearing pants. And it seems so silly, but like, hey, I wasn't that guy on Good Morning America who the whole world saw in, their shorts. Striking balance in our life activities. So I mentioned earlier, some days knitting works for me. Some days just binge watching Say Yes to the Dress works for me. And finding again what that is and on what those different days are. Meditate, right? Be open to not knowing, right? Allowing yourself to cry. Reducing things that create stress, and maybe that means, hey y'all, I really love you, but I can't do another Zoom call. I can't do another FaceTime. I'll catch up with you next week, right? Physical activity that is fun for you. Some folks like yoga, some folks like Zumba, some folks like lifting. Finding what works for you. And wearing clothes sometimes that makes you feel good. How many of us who are working from home just haven't worn jeans or real pants in a month, in 2 months? And so this isn't for me, but maybe wearing jeans is going to make me feel a little bit better. And again, remembering that self-care is not always fun. Go to bed, right? Shower. Get those errands done, right? I think we're all doing a lot more cleaning nowadays. And so maybe it's not cleaning the whole house on one Saturday. Maybe it's, today I'll clean the kitchen, tomorrow I'll clean the bathroom. Making sure that we're still doing preventative medical appointments. As things are opening up, doctors are still doing telehealth. We cannot forget our health. Eating healthy and eating regularly. Again, I come back to a little bit of accountability. It is so important for us to recognize our triggers. When we know what triggers we have, we are able to kind of stop or prolong the effects of that vicarious trauma, right? When I first started this work, I was a youth advocate in shelter, and it was rough. I would go home and I would cry, and I would go to work and I would come home and I would cry. And so I had to learn that I can't keep carrying on these stories. If I keep coming home and crying every day, I'm going to burn out really, really quickly. And so knowing that when it was a rough client, when it was a rough story, finding that person I could talk to, and then on my walk home, I would just like kind of vibe, zone out. And then when I got home, home was home. So COVID specific care, right? Like I said, like volleyball for me used to be a huge self-care. I can't do it anymore. And so what are things that we can do specifically now? Going easy on yourself, right? I'm sure most of us by now have seen that work. Like we're all working from home, or a lot of us are working from home. No, we're working during a pandemic and we happen to be home. And so if we're not as productive as we want to be, if we're not as on top of our game, that's okay. There is a global health crisis right now, right? Making sure that we're differentiating between allergies and symptoms of the virus, right? Making sure that we acknowledge that right now it's allergy season. So is my sore throat from symptoms, or is my sore throat because of something in the air, of pollen, right? Taking deep breaths, adding intermittent workouts, right? So maybe it's going for a walk for 5 minutes at 1 o'clock, making sure that if I'm sitting on my couch doing work, that at lunchtime I get up. Or maybe if I'm still going into shelter, it's making sure that I'm gonna hide in the bathroom and I'm gonna do some squats, or I'm gonna do some stretches. I was training police officers a few months back, and one of them walked in on me doing some stretches. A little embarrassing, but I was like, hey, we got to do what we got to do, right? It was a long day. I was feeling overwhelmed. I felt a little bit better afterwards, right? Getting your steps in, right? Not overdoing happy hours, and making sure that we moisturize, right? How many of us have noticed that our hands are a little bit more crackly than normal? We're sanitizing or washing all the time. And so something as simple as moisturizing our hands. And hey, while we're doing it, why don't I moisturize my face as well? And so really, as we kind of wrap up, because we're coming to the end of our time, looking, and what I want us all to do is talk to each other, right? So I would love to hear from you all in the last minute or two. What are things that you're doing right now for self-care? What are things or ideas that you think, other advocates or other folks in the space right now might find helpful, right? I mentioned for me, it's yoga, it's walks, it's knitting, and watching Say Yes to the Dress. Oh man, no self-care. This makes me nervous. So I'm going to challenge you all. If no one has self-care ideas to share, is that, you take another 5 minutes before you go back to your work. If you're at your desk, pretend like this webinar went long and you're still here. Or if you're at shelter, same thing. This webinar went a little bit long. And so take another 5 minutes and breathe, or play a game on your phone, or just say, hey, I forgot something in my car and I'm gonna go run outside and enjoy the sunshine. And maybe if I happen to walk around my car a couple times, that's okay. Oh, cleaning, same. Ooh, jump roping. I've never thought of that. I love that. But I'm a cleaner. I love to organize something. There will be a recorded. We will, as soon as I do it, we'll put it back up on our YouTube. Yes, so check probably next week sometime. So. I love the jump rope idea. I box sometimes and I forget how hard jump roping is actually. You kind of embarrassing how bad I am at it. Yeah, and so, thank you all so much for being here. I know this probably isn't a typical self-care where we all do, but I think it's, again, coming from that practical standpoint of finding those things that work and recognizing that it's okay to not be okay. Those things that we tell our clients, we need to tell ourselves sometimes too. So thank you all so much. I'm going to send out a couple of resources with some other really good ideas later this afternoon to you all. If you have questions, comments, concerns, we're here. And again, you all hear this, but thank you for doing the work that you do. It's really, really important. And it's really kind of been amazing to watch my coworkers that are advocates and working with folks technically in the courts, not in the courts, continue to do this. So thank you, and hopefully we will see you all in the future. Take care, everybody.